Hi, my name is Doug Vogt from the Dye-Hole Foundation. It's January 28th, 2021. And I have spent the last month and a half or so reading executive orders and laws, and you'll find out why. So this is what this video is going to cover. Somewhat of the continuation of the last video, video series 4, part 5G, and we're going to cover the Apollo interview of 2016, 1969, the DARPA subterranean challenge again, and what they're indirectly telling us is extremely important. I didn't think about it until about 2 weeks after I did the last video. I said, wait a minute, this is what they're really saying. Anyway, the first mistake that was made that changed our country and was due to an executive order that Nixon had done. And this is basically it. And I'll go through all of the executive orders that have to do with these buildings of these tunnels. Remember, a bureaucracy will not spend the money unless Congress has it authorized in a law or a presidential order has shifted money around and said which department is in charge of which things. So, the two books that I'll be dealing with, number one, philosophy of the theory has got to come first before you can figure out what causes the ice age and polar reversals. Many of you already know that because many of you have already bought that book. This one in chapter 8 and 3, 3 is the philosophy, chapter 8 is all the hard evidence from the journals that the sun does nova and the evidence it leaves behind, and most importantly, the mechanism. A little review from the previous video. We landed on the moon, Apollo 11 landed July 20th, 69. Apollo 17 was the last, and that was done in December of 72. So over a period of about 3.5 years, they had enough trips to the moon, brought samples back from various places of the moon, and even from the very first, you'll find out, they knew our sun novaed. The joke here is, in case you're only seeing this video for the first time and not the others, is that the Greek god Apollo was the sun god. So NASA sending the sun god to the moon to collect the evidence that the sun novaed. Now, who says they don't have a good sense of humor? Astronauts News Conference. This is only like about 60 weeks, about 2 months after they landed and came back from the moon. July 24th, July, August, September, so about two months back, they had an interview. Now, this is the YouTube link with a whole bunch of very funny comments. Just about everybody noticed one thing. During their interview, 2 of these guys were the first humans to walk on the moon. But they looked like they were at a funeral. And everybody noticed the same thing. Everybody's commented about the same thing. And the reason why is pretty simple. I'll explain in a few minutes. So the NASA link is here, but they don't have the comments. So you've got 2, and I'll put these both links on the description area down below. But you should definitely read the comments here and see their facial expressions. They do not look happy at all. And the reason is, like I mentioned in the previous video, they may not have known why they were going to the moon and why the samples. I think what they saw was they commented on the glazing on the top of moon rocks, as well as all the glass beads. There's probably more glazing below the glass beads, but remember, the sun novas, 7 or 8 hours, and the moon got a tremendous dose for 17 or 18 hours of cooking from the sun, and then the dust shell hit it, and then, so the dust probably covered a lot of these glazing below. So these guys must have been walking on broken glass. Now, they can't hear anything on the moon, but I think they felt it in their feet that they were walking on broken glass or something broken. So I think the intelligence community must have debriefed them and said, well, you're not going to mention this stuff. This is really what this was all about. And this is what happens. And that's why they look so sad. Disaster movies. Some of these things really have some truth in them. Armageddon was very good. What's interesting about this one is that it got the help from from the Air Force, NASA, a lot of government agencies helped them. If you look at the credits at the end of the movie, in this particular movie, and again, it was a meteor was going to hit the Earth, and it was going to destroy the place. So, but nobody's supposed to know about it. What was common for almost all of these movies is that the general population was never to know, God forbid. But they're going to pay the bill, foot the bill, to save somebody. So Deep Impact, same thing again, same thing. Nobody's supposed to know. At the last minute, everybody gets to know. They actually had a news conference months beforehand. That will never happen in real life. And again, in many of these movies, for some reason, they like destroying Europe. And this is the destruction of Paris. They love Paris, I think, because of the Eiffel Tower. They could show, okay, Paris got destroyed. The last movie was Greenland. Knowing was good. This was basically the sun cooking the Earth. Nicholas Payne was the actor, and it was a very good movie. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. 2012 was by Roland Emmerich, who loves my stuff. And again, the sun doing this. Supposedly the sun gives off neutrinos that heats up the upper mantle of the Earth, and the rest is the movie. And then finally, Greenland. Again, it's a meteor hitting the Earth and cooking the place and destroying it. And these two screenshots are from that movie. I'm sure all of you have their own special favorite. Enjoy them. Okay, DARPA. Now, I covered this in the previous video, part 5G. And this is the contest that they had. First, it was only like $500,000 was the prize. They've now upped it to $2 million for the final test. Now, what's interesting, first it was a virtual thing. They wanted to see what their software was. Then it was a tunnel circuit. Notice there's always a mine shaft here. Then it's an urban circuit, but look, it's a tunnel. It's like a subway tunnel, which I'm told there's rumors that there are subterranean electric trains that are in tunnels that connect these bases that they've got. So they evidently want the robot to go through those tunnels. We're not talking subway tunnels here or buildings on the surface. And then finally, the last one was the cave circuit, which you saw some of the stuff in the previous video. And I gave links for it, and I'll put links in the description area so you can watch them. Anyway, that's what this is all about. Now, if you think this is all about mine safety, you're wrong, and it's pretty obvious. If it was mine safety, it would go through the Department of Interior, U.S. Geological Survey. They're the ones in charge of mine safety. Now, there used to be a Bureau of Mines, but it got broken up, and coal mines and oil fields and stuff like that went to the Department of Energy, and the rest stayed in the Department of Interior, USGS, and I think one other subdivision within Department of Interior got it. So all of the Defense Department should never have gotten this. And I think everybody could agree on this. And we know that the other end of the tunnel that they were showing was controlled by the Army. So it was probably the Army Corps of Engineers. They were always intended as shelters. In fact, the sign that they had up there showed a shelter. Now, this is the part that finally clicked in my head after I did the last video, the previous video. They had two dummies here. Now, in the text they said, in the audio they said it was thermal dummies. In other words, they heat these things up. This one is laying down. I suspect it's not heated, even though there is a connector here. This guy is supposedly like a survivor. Now, he's got a connector here. You'll see it in a second. That's it. And he said basically that it's to to heat up these dummies. But if you'll notice, it's got a jacket, and the thermal signature isn't going to come off out of that jacket, but his hands would glow and the head would glow. So they want a robot to go through a cave, maneuver through a cave, and find either how many people are living or dead. Okay, secret government cave systems. I showed in the last video. This is a link of one of them, but here's a partial list of some of them that we know of around. Most of them are on the East Coast. There's one in Colorado, and there's more, I've been told, and I showed a map. I don't know if the map is true or not. We'll never know. Here's some of them where they are. Washington, D.C. CIA has their own, of course. And it's all through this whole area here. I remember the Appalachians across here, so you're going to have a lot of earthquakes during the reversal when this place stops. Okay, one of my fans had sent me an email with this picture. His father is in this row of men here. He worked for the federal government, a contractor, that was putting up, the cave systems for military reasons. And anyway, I'll read what he says. When I was in high school in 1973, his father, told me over supper that DOD, that's Department of Defense, was working on building a tunnel network using nuclear fuel from Rocky Flats. That's where the father was working. He said the machines melted solid rock, created glass wall tunnels that ran from coast to coast. He said he had been shown a movie detailing the entire planned network and the technology to be used. So as early as 73, now remember, this is after the samples came back from the moon, they knew our sun novaed. Now, you'll see later I'm going to show you the laws and executive orders that made this all happen. That's the physical evidence that this is all true. Now, I don't know how this thing would work to melt the rock, because you're making lava, and lava is like 3,000 to 5,000 degrees, and it would melt steel unless a lot of the stuff is made out of titanium or ceramics. But anyway, here's another link that he gave me about tunnels and tunnel systems by some other researcher, not myself, and I'll put a link there too. Anyway, he goes further. I remember when he visited the Nevada site at that time, and that must have been when this photo was taken. The machine picture is not one of the nuclear-powered tunnels, but you can see clearly U.S. Air Force on it. So they had the means of making tunnels prior to launch sites. I thought you might appreciate this indirect confirmation of some of your discoveries. Keep up the good work. It is much appreciated by those of us not wearing blinders or face diapers. I love that line, face diapers, don't you? Okay, what DARPA is telling us indirectly, and maybe you consider this directly, is that, one, the first responders or people to rescue these folks can't get to the cave entrance. So they have to rely on an automated, autonomous robot to be signaled to go through the tunnel system, photograph and record what it sees, and come back to the docking station like our Rhombus or iRobot vacuum cleaners. It has a program in there. It gets charged here, goes out, cleans your floor, and comes back. Well, they're doing the same thing here. So they're basically saying indirectly, or maybe directly, that rescuers cannot get to the cave entrance to go into the cave to see who's dead or alive and what's happened. A human does this job vastly superior than a robot. I think everybody listening could agree on that. So what they're basically saying, I'm going to tell you and I'm going to show you in a second, But you'll probably figure it out, but you'll see why. Now, I want those in the elite, what we call the elites, but certainly in Silicon Valley who is so against this president and anything else conservative, as well as most of the politicians, senators and congressmen, some governors, attorney generals, certainly the attorney general, and the people you're going to see in various departments. That is why they turned against Trump. You're going to know the whole thing. You're going to see it legally and literally why they did it. Okay. Okay, this is the reason why they had to come up with this. And they came up with it. They came up with this contest about 4 months after I got done with the majority of video series 4, which explained the Ice Age and polar reversals and what happens. So I think at that point they realized, I think we got a problem, and they figured out the same thing I did, what I'm about to tell you. Since I figured out what side of the Earth is going to be facing when the sun novas, what's going to happen is the jet stream is going to change direction because the Earth stops its rotation and goes in the other direction. That's explained in series 4. The sun's going to nova on a longitude. I got my globe here, and I'll use that. I think it might help. A longitude running from Nova Zembla, this area, across like this, is going to be high noon for when the sun actually does nova. 17 to 18 hours later, the dust shell should hit, this is the date line, someplace in here. In this area here, the dust shell is going to hit this side of the Earth. Exactly on the other side is Europe and Africa. So they're going to get the instant ice age just like Siberia did, and you saw those frozen elephants that I had. They're going to get the instant ice age. There, here's stripped down. This side like this. So you figure about 400 to 500 feet of ocean water worldwide is evaporated in the period when the sun novas. Then you have water vapor in the atmosphere. Then when it cools down real fast, we don't know how many hours it takes from the time the dust shell hits the Western Pacific that the atmosphere on the European side, I think I have it in the next video, where this atmosphere starts expanding rapidly in all directions to fill up the other side of the world that has extremely low atmospheric pressure. So the jet stream is already going to go in the other direction. So what do you think happens? All this water vapor condenses, becomes clouds, a lot of thick clouds. And it's going to be going in this direction. So what's going to happen here? You're going to have a really very bad ice age, like the West Coast had last time because the jet stream went in the other direction. So Seattle, we had an ice field of no less than 4,000 feet thick. They're going to have one of, depending down here, maybe 1,000 feet thick. Up here, 4,000 or 5,000 feet thick. At one time, we were taught that New York City had an ice field that was 5,000 feet thick. You could imagine that much ice and snow, just the ice. So this whole area is going to be covered in ice and snow. You want to know why they can't get rescuers along here to their cave entrances? Because it's going to be covered with thousands of feet of glacial ice and snow on top of that. As it is, if you've got your people that have made it out towards the equator, how long is it going to take them to get up here, or how many years after that they can get out of their caves to get up here to go see who the hell's alive? As it is, any tunnels they've built along here to connect their shelters is going to be broken up by the massive earthquakes at the time of the reversal. I mean, you have a 7 to 9 or maybe 10 Richter earthquakes that go on not for 1 or 2 minutes, no. Try for hours until the crust finally settles down. What do you think formed the Appalachian Mountains? The same thing, or the mountains down here. It's all the same reason. Anyway, I explained that in one of the earlier Series 4 videos. But that's the reason why they want autonomous. So they're probably going to have some kind of an antenna, probably on the surface of the Earth, on the Earth above where the shelter is, and they'll send a microwave signal down that'll pass through the ice and the water, and to turn the thing on. And it will then go through the cave system, record what it has to, come back when its battery gets low, and then report back through the antenna system, whatever they've come up with. That's the reason why. What they're saying, and I want the senators and congressmen who accepted what the agency was saying, and I'll say, you'll know what the agency is later and who made the mistake, that the shelters that they have promised you that you'll do what they say so this thing happens, they didn't know until I came along that they won't be able to get to those cave entrances or caves at all for many, maybe a couple of hundred years. Up here, you won't be able to get through a cave to maybe 300 years or 400 years until the ice melts. Down here, maybe a lot less, but still, it doesn't make any sense to be there. Man isn't intended to be a worm or a mole. We need ultraviolet light on our skin to create vitamin D3 and D2. So we're intended to be in the sunshine, not becoming a mole or a worm. So I think they finally realized it, and they created this contest. And to show you how much they were desperately to need outside opinion, they opened it up to anybody in the world, any institution or company that will help them come up with a robot that would do this. But it tells you right off the bat two things. One, they can't get to the cave entrance because, now you know why, thousands of feet of ice and snow. Two, they can't get anybody in there, so they have to rely on a robot to go through the cave system to see if anybody's still alive. These things are going to turn out to be nothing more than your tomb. So all those who were going along with the agency, including trying to destroy the Republic for an empire, using the Dominion software, you have been fooled. But I don't totally blame the CIA. It wasn't therefore they got this job. You're going to find out who gave it to them. In Europe is a special case. I'm going to go back to this. This ocean is going to go this way. It'll probably reach the Ural Mountains over here by the time this thing happens 18 hours later, and 19 or 20 hours this thing starts expanding. What'll happen, if they still have any water on the land, they're going to. It's going to be from a couple of hundred feet to 500 feet, could be 30 or 40 feet. When it starts freezing, this is a frozen wave. It goes all the way up to here. This isn't like 40 or 50 feet. This is a lot higher than that. And because this is a little bit near the French research area in Antarctica, which is by south of Australia. So that's the area that got the instant ice age last time. And this is what happened to an ocean wave, frozen solid. So those people in cave systems or in any kind of shelter, if you've got water over you, that's what's going to happen. You'll have to chisel your way out or you're never getting out. Personally, I don't think you'd ever get out. That's why I have relatives in Europe, and I don't really want them to die. I want them to go south. Okay, this is a recap of some what I had in the previous video, 5G. I wrote a letter to, the 3 letters went to the Pentagon and to top leadership. It had 15 subjects in it. I got an answer 12 business days later. The Pentagon got their letter on the 20th. I got an answer back September or something like 12 business days later, September 7th, there it is. And that letter, my letter to them was like 853 words. And he sent me back one that was 1,950 words. And it had 24 questions and 5 opinions that I had to answer. My response was 3,394, about 3,400 words. I answered everything. by September 12th. I'm only going to repeat part that I had. I had more of his letter, but not the whole thing, in the previous video, 5G. So, but this is the important, I want you to sink in. International depopulation in the near term appears likely. Much of the underground infrastructure required may already have been constructed. You can bet on it. It appears that the true U.S. government debt may exceed $91 trillion, which begs a host of questions and makes this belief plausible. In other words, they don't plan on paying it back. Even before COVID, there was Agenda 21 and multiple executive orders. Gives me an example, Executive Order 13575. That's an Obama executive order. Of course, I read it like I read most of them. And I'm going to cover that later, but you'll understand what's going on. I believe that there is a planned global movement towards fascism. Fascism is not right-wing, it is left-wing. It is National Socialism. National Socialism, socialism, and communism is nothing more than a redoing of feudalism. Top-down rule, and the people become the property of the state to do whatever they want, like depopulation. In China, when the Soviet Union fell, and it took them a couple of weeks or months, and they couldn't decide what form of government they're going to take and still stay in power. So they looked at what Hitler had done and said, you know, Schicklgruber had the right idea. And they went for National Socialism. That's why they allow private industry, private in quotes, but they still have control, one-party system, and they rule it by rules and regulations and taxes on industry. Sound familiar? Anyway, I think he may have given me this because he knew I was a good researcher and I would look it up and see what's going on. I don't know if he expected that I would go to this extent, but that's the reason why I didn't do any videos for, what, a month and a half? I believe that there is a planned global movement towards fascism which, with the end of facilitating the careful, orchestrated, and significant implosion of global populations, with special emphasis on the elimination of Kissinger's useless eaters. On that point, those of you, many of you minorities, who helped this plan of Dominion software and packing the, writing up and creating bogus ballots in various states, you're the useless eaters that they're talking about. You probably have signed your death warrants for you and your children. I want that to sink into your heads. It may take some time, but you're going to understand you've been used by the very party that you thought were for you. No, they weren't. They're only for themselves. By the way, they're not even for us white folk either. They only care about themselves. Okay, SEC filings about Dominion software. I went through this last time. The company got $400 million from a Swiss bank. The Swiss bank was controlled basically by the communist Chinese. You can read this, you can pause it and go through the whole gory details. The thing is entirely controlled by the Chinese. I want to thank Mark Cook, who took this picture, obviously in a warehouse, probably where he works, if that's his real name. I want to thank him. He's a good patriot. I'm going to explain what this all means. The CEO of Smartmantics, that's not the semantics, which I made a mistake last time verbally, but the writing fortunately was correct. Smartmantics, who basically promotes the software and these machines. By the way, it says Dominion voting made in China. So I'll tell you what that means. They're making these boxes. He admits they're connected to a network. That means it has a network card. Cat5 connection, because how else can you do it? You got a voting place where maybe you got 15, 20, or 30 of these machines. It's connected to a server. First, a router connected to the server, and that in turn is connected to the internet. So this is it. And I want this to sink into the people who fell for this stuff. That means the Chinese have the network, the IP address of every single network card that's in these voting machines. They can just ping the voting machine, the IP address of the voting machine, and they know exactly what's going on in there. You got that? So you don't know who changed the votes. I've heard stories it was changed in Germany, one in the Vatican. I'll tell you one place for sure they had access. It was in China. They're the ones who made the machine. They have the IP address of each and every one of these machines. President Trump had over 50 lawyers who collected evidence about the election fraud. But the Department of Justice, in quotes, and the FBI, which is really part of the Department of Justice, they aren't going to do anything unless they tell them to do it, refused to take it or look at the evidence. Got that? Blatant voter fraud, but they didn't want to look at it at all. That was Trump's Department of Justice, but still they wouldn't do it. You're going to find out why. Okay, to figure out a great secret, again, like I said before, you have to find what event happened that caused another group of people to react to it. I did that with December of '57 when the sun went crazy, and then 7 months later they created NASA to go to the moon to get the evidence. Okay. These are the laws and stuff like that I've read, plus others, plenty others. This law here is called the War and Natural Defense Act of 1950. Actually, that law goes back to 1916 and amended over the years, once in 1933, I think 1940, etc. Defense Production Act 1950, again, amended quite a few times over history. A lot of the executive orders that have to do with this stuff were then folded into these two laws, or this law here, or this law here. Well, this one actually changed some of the things in this one. But I'm going to try to show you. This is the legal, physical evidence of what they're doing. Apollo 11 lands on the moon, July 20th. They come back on the 24th, 4 days later. Thomas Gold, PhD in physics, writes a journal article. That's like a month and a half later. He was able to get into the comment area in Science magazine. And I'll give you the source of it in a second. And he's saying that a nova could have caused the glazing on the rock. By the way, I have the article if you send me an email. By the way, leaving comments I don't generally answer. I can't answer all the comments that people leave. If you send an email to info@dieholefoundation.com, I try to answer as many or as all the emails I get. This is his article. This is where it is. Thomas Gold, Science, Volume 168, September 26, 69. That's the page number. You can go to your library and read the whole thing. Apollo 11, observations of a remarkable glazing phenomena on the lunar surface. Abstract. Some glazing is apparently due to radiation heating. It suggests a giant solar outburst in geologically recent times. The phenomenon may not be in the nature of a flare, but in the nature of a very minor nova-like outburst of the sun. The nova phenomena among the stars is not understood. That's true to this day. Hell, they don't know what the hell's inside the center of the sun. It's not an iron core either. One can therefore not completely rule out the possibility that stars that are like the sun do have occasional instabilities of internal origin, but very much weaker than a nova. Well, he's wrong about that. The reason there is no mini-novas, there is no micronovas. Those are probably just solar cycles that we don't understand, or in time. We know of the sunspot cycle, where the sun's output increases. The Gleisberg cycle certainly does. There's others that are about 500 years, there's 3,000 years, the 1,508 year, 6,000 year maybe. So there's a lot of cycles upon cycles, and we don't know what happens in some of these. They may be really pretty violent, but it's not a nova. The reason I figured it out is I covered it earlier in video series 4, but it's like this. if you have, I calculated for if 350 feet of ocean water was evaporated, and I took that number because they found mastodon teeth as well as tree trunks and stumps and stuff like that in the continental shelf, and it was that deep down. But it really went down to about 400, 450 feet. So I figured out how many calories of heat it takes to evaporate 350 feet of ocean water. And it turned out well over 6 billion calories applied to every square foot of ocean water worldwide. Now, remember, the sun is only doing it on one side. So probably on that side that sees the sun when it novas, probably over 1,000 feet is evaporated, and then it gradually goes up. And I created a graph, and you could see it in one of those earlier videos. So that's not a solar outburst. That's not a mini nova. That's called a nova when you have that much heat applied and evaporating that much ocean water. Okay. After, I'm going to go back to here. After this report, 1 month later, Nixon created this executive order assigning emergency preparedness functions to federal departments and agencies. 339 words. It's a big executive order, one of the biggest ones. It's a number 11490. Created also 10 days, about 18, 19 days later, providing for the Administration of Disaster Relief Act of 1969. I'll be revisiting this list. Okay, in his executive order, he literally lists all the agencies that are responsible or covered in his executive order. This is important because this same list you're going to see a little later. And then you'll understand what this is all about. In Nixon's executive order, section 102, department and agencies of the federal government are hereby severally charged with the duty of assuring the country of the federal government in any national emergency type situation. Not saying war, any national emergency. Shall develop such plans and take such actions, including but not limited to those specified in this order. Goes on further. Any emergency. It's not just war or the United States being attacked. In fact, in this whole 17,300 some odd words, he only mentions the word war, I think, 4 times. Succession of office, emergency authority, safekeeping of essential records, yeah, like that, they keep our index, IRS records. Emergency relocation sites supported by communications and required services. There's the building of your tunnel systems. Emergency action steps, alert alternate headquarters or command facilities. There's the order that the bureaucracy had to spend on building this stuff. Part 7 of the same executive order, protection of government resources. I've highlighted the stuff that's important. A lot of it's, I wouldn't say boilerplate, but more details. Director of the Office of Emergency Preparedness. This becomes later FEMA. And FEMA gets split up a little bit with Homeland Security. But FEMA gets this stuff. In addition to the activities indicated above, the heads of departments and agencies described in Part 2 through Part 29, that big long list of this order, shall prepare national emergency plans, develop preparedness programs, and attain an appropriate state of readiness. You know, they gotta get ready for this thing, but they don't know what's going to happen. With respect to the functions assigned to them in this order, all conditions of national emergency. Notice he didn't say just war and attack. You know, having the sun nova on you, there's a good reason to, and they may not know it was a nova. They may just think a big solar flare. Remember, this was created only about 11 or 12 years after the sun really flared up. They didn't know, they were in the midst of another sunspot maximum. They didn't know if this one was going to go like it did 11 or 13 years ago. So that's why they were rushing to do this stuff. Their model of the sun was not correct. They knew it. They had a problem. So anyway, okay. Now we get to the mistake. What did Nixon do? He was right in doing an executive order. But what did he do? He gave this project to overview to the CIA, a spy agency. That is why William Casey, this is Reagan's first cabinet meeting in 1981. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. Nobody knew really why, except I had figured it myself. Now you're beginning to get a better picture. You're seeing the laws and executive orders and what happened. So he gave it to the wrong agency. What happened is a spy agency, they're great liars. They have to, when they go overseas, their agents have to become pathological liars to get information out of other people. So what did the agency do? Now, say, we got to keep this a secret. Now, one technique that governments use is if they know a project or a scientific idea is wrong, they'll actually give it out because they know it leads to a dead end. So what they did is, since I showed to you that they're involved up to their eyeballs with the National Science Foundation, they wind up only promoting funding science papers that would lead away from the fact that our sun novas. And that's what happens. I showed you in the previous video that when you compared even searching for fission tracks or cosmic rays, the number in the journal Nature, which was done in Europe, in England, is much, much higher than the few articles they took in the journal Science, which is here. So by deliberately fooling the scientists for probably since 1973, so they fooled and brainwashed 2.5 generations of scientists, astrophysicists, physicists, geologists, geophysicists, to keep them not thinking in terms of our sun novas and as a clock cycle run through time. In the previous video, 5G, I showed that in 1983, the Army already knew I was right. They took most of the stuff from that paper that I showed from my book, Reality Revealed, The Theory of Multidimensional Reality. Took it right from it, chapter 7, and the philosophy. So the paper, in case you haven't seen that video, and you will now, it had to do with, they wanted to do remote viewing to spy on the enemy. Anyway, they were the wrong agency to give this project to keep it a secret. It should have been given to the Department of Interior, U.S. Geological Survey, to NOAA, and to NASA. And just tell them to keep it a secret, and this is what the research you're going to do. By doing what they did, they've deceived everybody, and they fooled themselves. They go ahead and they got advice from maybe climatologists and historians and geologists and stuff like that, and they built these things in the wrong place, having no idea what the total mechanism is, what happens when the sun novas during the reversal. So they spent trillions of dollars. 21 is only scratching the surface. To build these things, they buried it in various agencies, and you're going to find out who the agencies are. And they fooled themselves. Somebody, an accountant in Bellevue, Washington, figured it out, and they didn't. Obama's executive order. Now, I'm going to skip around a little bit here because I've been talking about how this all came about and why they went against Trump. Then later I'll go into some of the other executive orders. Executive Order 13575, establishment of the White House Rural Council. The council shall coordinate its policy development through the Domestic Policy Council and the National Economic Council. This is supposed to help farmers and rural America. You'll see it does nothing. It's designed to do nothing, but it does something else, and you'll find out. Mission and function of the council. Basically, they have a meeting of various departments to make a recommendation to these councils, which means it does nothing. And it goes to the president, and he has to decide what he's going to do. Coordinate increase and effectiveness of federal engagement with rural stakeholders. I went through the whole thing. These are the only ones that really made even any kind of sense. Coordinate federal efforts directed towards the growth and development of geographic regions that encompass both urban and rural areas. But that's saying nothing specific. Identify and facilitate rural economic opportunities associated with energy development, outdoor recreation, and other conservation-related activities. Oh. Okay, Donald Trump comes along. He gets elected. He's in January of 17. By April 25th, he actually wanted to do something. Executive Order 13790, promoting agriculture and rural prosperity in America. I read his paper. I think it was like 1,300 or 1,400 words. Obama's was 800 and something. Membership, Secretary of Agriculture shall serve as the chairman of the task force. It lists 22 departments, and I'm going to show that to you in a second. Propose and function of the task force. Task force shall identify legislative, regulatory, and policy changes to promote in rural America, American agriculture, economic development, job growth, infrastructure improvements, technology and innovation, energy security, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. Remove barriers to economic prosperity, quality of life, advance adoption of innovative and technology for agricultural production and long-term sustainable rural development, strengthen and expand education opportunities, ensure access to reliable workforce and increase employment opportunities. Go on further. Promote and preserve family farms, changing the estate taxes. Ensure the water user private property rights are not encumbered. In other words, to a farmer, water access is the most important. Improve food safety. Laws are based on science, not crap. Encourage the production, export, and use of domestically produced agricultural product. Further the nation's energy security by advancing traditional renewable energy. That's ethanol. Section 6, revocation, Executive Order 13575 of June 2011, that's Obama's, establishing the White House Rural Council, is hereby revoked. Now you see the difference. Obama's, what is it? It's boilerplate and looks good to the public, doesn't do anything. Trump's actually does something. There's a whole bunch of things. When I have any of these executive orders I have as Word files, more than happily send it to you. You can go read it yourself. Okay, now we're going to do this is how you do it. And this is why that Army officer sent me that executive order of Obama's, that one. This is Nixon's executive order. It's in 2 pages. You're going to see this page, and the next one has the rest of them. These are the departments that Nixon listed. These are the departments that, now, this is based on a national emergency and something totally different. It has nothing to do with agriculture other than to produce food in an emergency. Obama's, I just showed you Obama's executive order. Why does it have Department of Treasury, Department of Defense? Like they care about rural America? No, their job is to protect the nation and, blow things up and kill people. The Justice Department. Now I can understand here because you want to prosecute foreign nationals if they're responsible for an attack on the United States, but why farmers and rural America? A post office, no longer an agency any longer. Department of Interior, that makes sense. Agriculture makes sense. Commerce makes sense. Labor, yes. Health and Human Services, that makes sense. Department of Education. By the way, this was split up. It was once education. They split up to a separate department, courtesy of Carter. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Missing. You'll find out why. Department of Transportation. That makes sense in a bill, in the executive order. Atomic Energy Commission. Department of Energy, Department of Energy. Civil Aeronautics Board became Department of Transportation. Secretary of Transportation. Here's the rest of them. Nixon's executive order, Obama's, Trump's. Federal Bank Reserve Agency, Department of Treasury. Missing. Don't need it. Because Treasury has nothing to do with really improving the farmer other than the tax change. But it's missing. It was unnecessary. Federal Communications Commission, okay, that's a stretch. Department of Energy, Federal Power Commission, Department of Transportation, not mentioned here, a National Science Foundation, mentioned here on his because he wanted to have real science involved in food safety and stuff like that. Small Business Administration listed in both because that's small farmer, small business. United States Civil Service Commission, Department of Labor, Department of Labor. Veterans Administration here, I don't know why they, there's no reason to even list it here. There's no point to it. In a national emergency, it makes some sense. But for farmers, the Veterans Affairs, it doesn't make any sense. Office of Emergency Preparedness, that's Homeland Security, but it's also FEMA. So they got basically split. They got both things. Really, it's FEMA, and it's missing from Trump's completely. Now you're going to know why that's missing, and why the bureaucracy turned against Trump. Back to our laws and how we can continue. I'm going to go through Ford's, Carter's, Reagan's. Now, Reagan's executive order revokes Nixon's, but then creates his own, and it's then all incorporated in the Robert T. Stanford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. Boy, that's a mouthful. The joke here, now this is in 1988. The movie Armageddon, Bruce Willis, the star, plays Harry Stanford. They took the name Stanford from this law. Whoever wrote this play, the screenplay, must have known about this disaster thing. Maybe he knew more that he's not telling. And George Bush and stuff like that. I'll go through some of them that pertain. Okay, Ford's executive order. I'm only going to hit the highlights of it. I'm not going to bore you. Okay, Preparedness, Organization, Functional Changes in Federal Departments and Agencies, 76. Phase, the Office of Emergency Preparedness is deleted here, and it becomes Federal Preparedness Agency. It was just an office under the president. It becomes an agency. Okay, stockpiles in Section 8. Inventories of food resources to be increased. Stockpiles for survival purposes. Got it? Ronald Reagan's executive order. Assignment of emergency preparedness responsibilities. Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is important. That's one of the departments, along with the Defense Department, that was, I wouldn't say it's missing $21 trillion. They know what they spent it on. They refuse to say what they spent it on. Now you kind of know. Lead responsibility. In addition to the applicable responsibilities covered in Part 1 and 2, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall develop plans for provisions and management of housing and national security emergencies, including, now they didn't say war, national and security emergencies, like the sun's going to nova and That's an emergency. Providing temporary housing using federal financing and other arrangements. B, providing for radiation protection by encouraging voluntary construction of shelter and voluntary use of cost-effective design and construction techniques to maximize population protection. Now you think first, okay, nuclear war, yes, that's radiation. When a star novas, it gives off cosmic rays. Guess what? Those are also atomic bullets, that's radiation. Now, a building and stuff like that, some of it can protect you from some things, from some radiations. But in a cost-effective method, if you buy a bunch of spent gold mines and other mines around the country, hey, the hole's already there. We know the Army bought one. And all you have to do is expand it and work it out and fix it up and reinforce it. And you've got yourself an instant shelter. And when it comes to protection from radiation, cosmic rays, no problem. And certainly that's what this is all about. This is what this is really about. The important part of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Robert T. Stanford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. Here's the law number. I have it if you want to read it. It's 71,000 words. In there, section 102, major disaster. Major disaster means any natural catastrophe. That's not war. That's anything else, including any hurricane, tornado, storm. I won't go through all of them. Oh, snowstorm, that's a good one. Landslide, yeah. Volcanic eruption, that'll happen too. Earthquakes, yeah, no question. Tsunami, yeah. We'll have the Pacific Ocean rushing over us. Trust me, that's going to be one hell of a tsunami. Flooding, okay. In any part of the United States which in the determination of the president causes damage of significant severity and magnitude. Section 201, Federal and State Disaster Preparedness Programs. Utilizing a service of other agencies, President is authorized to establish a program of disaster preparedness that utilizes services of all appropriate agencies, and including preparation of disaster preparedness plans for mitigation, warning, emergency operations, rehabilitation, etc. So, okay. Section 2, disaster warnings. Readiness federal agencies issue warnings to state and local officials. Probably some of the governors in many of the states have been told about this. They'd have to if they're going to build a bunch of tunnels on the East Coast. Yes, I suspect the governor would probably have to know. Now, that may explain why some of them were more than happy to have the Dominion software to have this agency plan enacted. Agreements with commercial communication systems for use of facilities. The President is authorized to enter into agreements with the officers or agents of any private or commercial communication systems who volunteer the use of their system on a reimbursable or non-reimbursable basis for a purpose of providing warning to governmental authorities and civil populations endangered by disasters. This is how the media, the major networks, and probably Facebook, Google, Yahoo, all of Silicon Valley, and all the networks have been partially told what this is about. Now, you say to yourself, okay, how does depopulation, where you have a smaller customer base, help a guy who's in business to manufacture a product or media? You want a bigger population so your revenues go up, and therefore your profits go up. What I think happened is they were promised something that their money could not buy, a golden survival ticket. You got that? If you do what we say and you monitor and you cut out any kind of information that we don't want, then we'll give you and your family and your grandkids shelter in these things when this thing finally does happen. That's what makes some sense, nothing else. Emergency Preparedness, Title 6 of that law, Section 602 definition of emergency preparedness, defines it, measures to undertake in preparation for anticipated hazards, including establishment of appropriate, let me go on to what the good stuff is, procurement and stockpiling of necessary materials and supplies, the provisions of suitable warning systems, the construction or preparation of shelters, shelter areas and controlled centers when appropriate, and non-military evacuation of civilian population. Only if you're on that list. Measures to be undertaken during a hazard, including the enforcement of passive defense regulations prescribed by duly established military or civil authorities, the evacuation of personnel to shelter areas, control of traffic and panic, and the control and use of lighting and civil communications. Translation with lighting. If they want to stop the riots, they figure they're going to turn off the electricity in your town. That means also your cell phones won't work, they can't communicate and stuff like that. Telephones are down. Communications, the telephones, the cell phones, stuff like that. I'm sure you're all getting a picture of what this is all about, and you realize this is the legal foundation for these agencies to do this stuff, to build these things. But as I said earlier, they made a colossal mistake. Subtitle A is Powers and Duties. Duties and functions of administration, emergency preparedness measures, developing shelter design and materials for the protective covering or construction. Again, authority again to go spend the money to build these tunnel systems and shelters. Developing equipment or facilitating affecting the standardization thereof to meet emergency preparedness requirements. By the way, in one of the earlier videos I showed the guy in, where was it, Iowa or Ohio, who makes these hand crank generators, and he got orders for thousands of them from a contractor of the government, and they went into these tunnel systems. So they had a way of making portable electricity by hand or foot. That's what they're referring to this. God knows what else they're thinking about doing, probably portable or small nuclear reactors to provide electricity. But those things aren't going to last forever. If you can get one to work for maybe 20 or 30 years or 40 years, you're lucky. But if you're stuck in a cave for 100, 150 or 200 years, your descendants, those things are not going to work. They're going to break down. Section 771, National Disaster Recovery Strategy. In general, the administration, in coordination with the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, shall develop, coordinate, and maintain a national disaster recovery strategy to serve as a guide to recover efforts after major disasters and emergencies. I think this is the end of this part of it. Section 772, the National Disaster Housing Strategy shall contain and outline effective cost and effective federal programs that will best meet the short-term and long-term housing needs of individuals, households affected by a major disaster. In other words, decent-sized living accommodations in these tunnels and caves. And I've heard of stories, just stories, I don't know if it's true, of really big shelters. The agency in charge of it, Department of Housing and Urban Development. They keep popping up over and over again. George Bush's Homeland Security Act of 2002 was a law, became a law. Role of Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. FEMA got a lot of this, got a lot to do with this response by conducting emergency operations to save lives and property through positioning emergency equipment and supplies, through evacuating potential victims, through providing food, water, shelter, and medical care to those in need, and through restoring critical public services. Shelters, again, the cave systems. In other words, this agency, FEMA, with HUD, are the ones, the lead people doing this stuff. At least that's what it's in their budgets. Obama Executive Order 13603, National Defense Resources. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but include emergency preparedness activities conducted pursuant to Title VI of the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief Emergency Act. He refers in this executive order to this law, and to recap what the law says: procurement and stockpile of necessary materials and supplies, provisions of suitable warning systems, I guess that would be communications, construction and preparation of shelters, goes on. So you see, executive orders then got folded into statutes that they have to do it. There always has to be a legal reason and authority for an agency to spend money. I figure an accountant would wind up figuring this out. The next stage I want to add one thing on this thing. Now, why do they all go against Trump? Because the three agencies, let me go back to that table again. Yeah. I showed you in the laws and executive orders, the departments that were supposed to be involved in building these things and supplying them were missing from his executive order, which told me, is it possible they never told him about these cave systems and what they were for, or that the sun does nova? Maybe it's possible. So if you want to know why the Attorney General didn't do crap, it's because the Department of Justice is listed here. They had meetings in this executive order. You saw the order. And the later law, they had to have meetings, and they planned these facilities and building them and expanding them and supplying them in the cover of a rural council. The newsmen would never care. Okay, they're all a rural council. Who cares about farmings and rural council? It's flyover country. Who cares about them? But that's where they were doing all the planning. So what happens? Trump eliminates the most important ones that were involved in this thing. Homeland Security and FEMA. Not listed. That's why they went after him. Well, they didn't help at all. And it's because either they'd never told him, or the other thing I'm really wondering about, maybe somebody within HUD could tell us, why did Trump appoint Ben Carson, a gifted surgeon, a neurosurgeon, as head of HUD? The one who should be head of HUD is somebody who knows about building things, construction costs. The only person in the administration that knew that was Trump himself. He's a builder, and he had dealings with HUD. I throw this out. Is it possible that HUD was really being run by Trump, and Ben Carson was merely a place saver for the entire 4 years of Trump's administration, and really he was really approving things and doing things? And maybe that's why they went after him, because they couldn't do what they wanted to do, was basically supply these shelters, because they didn't know when this thing was going to happen until I came along. Okay, the next step for the foundation is, this is what we have to do. I want to get a hold of, I got a hold of a couple of mechanical and civil engineers. I got a couple of geologists, but I need more, and mining engineers. This is the goals that we have to do next. Find geologically safe areas to build caves or pyramid shelters, where we're looking for areas no more than 15 degrees north or south of the equator, for the reason I explained in previous videos. Find local geologists in the areas of interest to help find safe, buildable areas in those countries. Namely, in the Americas, it would be Brazil, maybe Eastern Colombia, Southern Venezuela. Those are the areas you need people there to look. If you're in Europe and the Middle East, you'll probably be going to Africa. Again, same situation. The only problem you have there is the sun's going to nova. They may not have that much water rushing over them, because a lot of it's going to be evaporated as this ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, rushes over Africa. A lot of it's going to be evaporated by the sun. 3, design a door system that will take the very high pressures of ocean water, apply to it for many hours. And that's one of the things that the civil engineers were looking at, and mechanical engineers. It's a lot of pressure. But there's a couple of variables. How far away is the cave system from the ocean, your body of water that is west of you, and what your elevation is. And so these are some of the things we have to have help with. And I don't think us few people should be the only ones doing this stuff. It'd be nice if NOAA would help, and maybe NASA or USGS would help. Anyway, start to contact some of the countries to get permission to build shelters in their countries. Accountants tend to do everything by the book, and you have to do this legally. If you're going to get hundreds of families going to one area to build a shelter system, you're going to have to get permission from that government. 1, to legally be able to buy that land. 2, to get permits to do that and actually go there and stay there and have the legal rights to that land so locals or someone else doesn't steal it from you. So you have to do it by the book, and we're also going to have to deal with the U.S. State Department to help also. I'm hoping that people in power see these videos and they understand what my goals are, really to save people's lives. I don't care what race you are, what religion you are, or where you are. You all have a right to survive, or at least your descendants, to survive this thing. None of us asked for this to happen, and believe me, I did not expect that in my later part of my life I'd be doing this and sitting in front of a camera trying to tell people that maybe in 25 years and a few months you're all going to be dead unless you do something. This is not what I'm looking for in my life. Later research will then be talking about what to bring with you, what survivors should be doing, who should be saved, suggestions only, and what you should have in this group. There'll be multiple groups and stuff like that. The next video will also go into what things people should avoid, so you should not be taken in by charlatans who basically just want your money, and like the cults we've had in the past, the Jim Jones of the world. Try to avoid them at all costs. So they, I don't want people to move someplace in a remote area. Live where you are. Stay close to your family and friends. If anyone tries to separate from you from your friends and your relatives, you run away from them. Don't go near them. Anyway, I hope you learned something. Remember, you want to contact me, the best is really email. I'll try to answer a few of the comments, but I'm trying to finish a book and I've got a lot of work to do. Thank you very much.